Staphysagria, staph. Main indications of staphysagria are psychological problems, impotence, addiction to excessive smoking, postoperative care. Key symptoms of staphysagria are conditions generated as side effects of surgery, particularly urogenital surgery, suppressed emotions, increased sex drive and masturbation. Summary of staphysagria picture are staphysagria is most appropriate for people who bottle up their emotions, especially rage. They tend to be extremely sensitive, particularly to criticism or rudeness. Irritation and anger can bubble away inside them, although they appear mild-natured and yielding on the surface, avoiding confrontation. When their emotions finally erupt, they often overreact and tremble with anger. There may be a history of abuse. Common physical symptoms include perspiration, gas, and stools that smell of rotten eggs. Cravings for alcohol and sweet foods are typical. Suppressing emotions may cause headaches, depression, or an increased sex drive. Despite shyness, the libido is often high and there is a tendency to masturbate. Staphysagria is generally most commonly prescribed for cystitis and other urogenital disorders, and for joint pains and neuralgia, skin conditions, insomnia, and toothaches. For the psychological effects of sexual excesses. Very sensitive to the slightest mental impressions, least action or harmless word offense, ignatia. Mechanical injuries from sharp cutting instruments, post-surgical operation, stinging pains, like the cutting of a knife. Craving for tobacco. Extreme hunger, even when stomach is full of food. Warts are dry, pedunculated, cauliflower-like. Honeymoon cystitis, morning sickness. Modalities of staphysagria are worse by anger, indignation, grief, mortification. Loss of fluids, onanism, sexual excesses. Tobacco. Least touch on the affected parts. Better by after breakfast. Warmth. Rest at night. Details about staphysagria are the mental symptoms are very important, and the impressions made upon the mind and thence upon the body guide to staphysagria as a remedy. Excitable, easily aroused to anger, but seldom irascible, that is, easily disturbed and excited, but seldom manifests it. Suitable in cases where complaints come from pent-up wrath, suppressed anger, suppressed feelings. The person becomes speechless from suppressed indignation, anger with indignation. Complaints brought on by these causes, irritable bladder with frequent urging to urinate, lasting many days after suppressed wrath, after insults. Great indignation about things done by others or by himself, grieves about consequences. A gentleman comes in contact with one beneath his station and an altercation takes place, an argument which ends in insult, and the gentleman turns his back on the other. He goes home and suffers. He does not speak it out but controls it and then suffers from it. He has sleepless nights and many days of fatigue, brain fag. For days and weeks he cannot add nor subtract, makes mistakes in writing and speaking, has irritability of the bladder, colic, etc. Loss of memory with a sense of weight between the eyes. It is difficult to say whether this is a feeling in the head or an effort to describe a dullness of mind. Feels as if a ball of wood were in the forehead, or as if the whole cerebrum were made of wood. It feels numb. It is difficult to state whether it is a condition of the mind or head. Accompanying this sensation of a lump in the forehead as a feeling as if the whole back of the head were hollow, the patient may describe it as a feeling of numbness or a lack of sensation. Indifferent, low-spirited, dullness of mind after onanism. Staph cures these conditions when they are the result of sexual excitement, masturbation, excesses in venery, allowing the mind to dwell too much on venereal subjects. Thinking on sexual relations. These patients are irritable, easily fatigued, most excitable, and when they have to control their emotions they suffer intensely. One who is in health can easily put aside a controversy, knowing that he has done what is right, but a staph patient when he has to control himself goes all to pieces, trembles from head to foot, loses his voice, his ability to work, cannot sleep and a headache follows. Many a time a man has come into my office with blue lips, trembling hands, pains about the heart and all over, and he thinks he is going to die. He tells a story of an altercation and pent-up wrath, and staph stops his trembling and quiets him. Without it he would have sleepless nights, brain fag, prostration and headache. This state belongs especially to those who have indulged in sexual excesses. Now, the next step. The senses are in this same irritable state, so that the tips of the fingers are sensitive, the ears are sensitive to noise, the tongue is sensitive to tastes and the nose to odors, so sensitive that everything is painfully sensated. Every little inflamed spot will have in its center sensitive points, little nerve spots. Ulcers when touched cause the patient to go all to pieces and a convulsion threatens. Hemorrhoidal tumors are so sensitive that they cannot be touched. Little nerve tumors form in the skin, little polypoid growths the size of a wheat grain and denuded of epithelium, covered with moisture, red, inflamed, blue, and a mere touch will throw the patient into convulsions and suffering for days and nights. A hypersensitive nerve growth will come out on the hand or on the back. Sometimes it turns black. Again, a little wart will come out, especially about the genital and anus, little caruncular growths about the urethra and vagina, so sensitive that if nipped between the fingers the patient will go into spasms, especially if a woman. Staph suits all three of the miasms. These nervous states run all through the complaints. Look for a case of staph, where the whole mind and nervous system are in a fret. The staph headache is a numb, dull pain in the occiput and forehead, especially in these nervous constitutions. Sensation is of a round ball in the forehead, sitting firmly there even when shaking the head. Headaches from vexation and indignation. Crusty squamous eruptions on the scalp. Painful sensitiveness of the scalp, skin peels off, with itching and smarting, worse in the evening and from getting warm. The scales are lifted up by a watery exudate and the denuded surface is extremely sensitive to touch. New growths about the lids and balls of the eyes, extremely painful to the touch. Meibomian tumors, thuja, in irritable children, crios. Another feature in staph is its action on the scrofulous glands of the neck enlarged and indurated ovaries and testes, stitching, tearing pains in the glands everywhere. Hardness and chronic induration. Stitching, tearing pains along the course of the nerves, in the heart, and as in such a nervous patient the mind is likely to be on the heart, the stitching pains in the intercostals are supposed to be in the heart. Stitching pains directly through the chest to the back. Swelling of the tonsils after the abuse of mercury. Chronic tonsillitis. Tonsils are not large but hard from previous attacks of acute tonsillitis, strumous diathesis, cross and irritable. Pains come on after eating. The staph patient has much difficulty in the bowels. Subject to chronic diarrhea and to constipation. Colic, twitching, tearing pains in the abdomen. Diarrhea from cold water, from eating, from indignation, anger, with flatulence of a terribly offensive odor like spoiled eggs. Chronic diarrhea or dysentery of weakly, sickly children after anger, after being punished, after emotions. Colic and chom. Staph and colic resemble each other. In both, eating and drinking cause griping and stool, both have colic as if stones were squeezing, staph. In the intestines, head and testes, colic, in the intestines and ovaries, both are worse from anger. Cost, colic, and staph follow each other like sulfur, calc, and lyc. It often happens that nervous women soon after marriage are attacked with frequent and painful urging to urinate, which becomes extremely troublesome and may last many days. Staph is very comforting to the young wife. Great teasing and tearing all night long, bloody urine, involuntary discharge of urine, acrid and corroding, with burning, worse from motion. Profuse discharge of pale urine with burning and urging. Burning during and after urination. Staph has cured enlarged prostate with frequent urging to urinate, especially in old men, continued teasing with dribbling. Frequent urging to urinate, with scanty discharge and thin stream or discharge of urine in drops, may be followed by a sensation as if the bladder were not fully emptied. The most distressing symptom of the male genitals is excitability, but there is also impotence, great weakness of the sexual organs, the sexual desire is greatly increased but there is impotence. Useful in the results of secret vice, long practiced. Seminal emissions followed by great chagrin and mortification, prostration, dyspnea. Effects of onanism are sexual excesses, loss of memory, hypochondriasis, taciturnity, face sunk in abashed look, nocturnal emissions, backache, weak leg, relaxed organs, deficiency of vital heat and tendency to take cold, deep sunken, red, and lusterless eyes, hair falls out, loss of prostatic fluid and impairment of sexual desire, dull and contusive pains in the testicles, voluptuous itching of the scrotum, atrophy of the testicles. Think of the extremely nervous patient. Dry, sensitive warts about the genitals, from psychosis or from the abuse of mercury, which causes a tendency to warty growths. Moist, red, offensive warts belong to thuja. The testes dwindle as well as become inflamed and swollen, genitals waste away. Sensation as if there were worms crawling over him. Crawling, etc., in the female external genitals, cough, plat, petrol, APIs, turrent. Hisp, the latter has, while outer parts feel as if insects were biting and crawling, better from heat or cold. In the female, there is violent sexual excitement, nymphomania with extreme mental and physical impressions. Mind has been dwelling too much on sexual subjects. Very sharp, shooting pains in the ovary, which is exquisitely sore to touch. Pains extend along crural regions and thighs. Menses irregular, late and profuse, sometimes wanting, first of pale blood, then dark and clotted. Scorbutic diathesis, vegetations of the vagina, stinging, itching of the vulva. Stitching in the region of the heart, trembling of the body with nervous excitement is an excellent indication for staph. Effects from loss of blood, shock, from surgical operations, injuries from sharp instruments, incised wounds, stinging, etc., in surgical wounds, cuts, colic after lithotomy, urging to stool, qualmishness, worse from drinking. Tetter on the hands, itches and burns in the evening after scratching, numbness in the tips of the fingers, arthritic nodosities on the fingers. I remember a patient suffering from gouty nodosities. He had lived a life of peculiar continence, dwelling on his vices, broken down in body. Staph brought out an eruption on his legs as high up as the knees that looked like a pair of trousers. One continuous coat of crusts which lasted a year before it dwindled, but he was greatly improved in his body and his enlarged joints gradually improved. The eruption was yellow, crusty, tough, leathery, and, when lifted up by the moisture beneath, it had to be cut off like a bandage. He was practically crippled, new crops came out on the parts clipped off. It was with difficulty that he walked, for the crusts cut him. Bone troubles, exostosis, inflammation of the periosteum. Acute articular rheumatism of fast or debilitated men, with shifting pains. Mercurial bone diseases, ulcers, caries, injuries caused by sharp, cutting instruments. Nightly bone pains. A soft murk, sill.